So in topic 15, we need to know what is logistics to understand logistics management. So if you think to yourself what you think logistics is, let's see how close it comes to what we cover in this topic here. So if you remember our SCORE model, logistics is involved in nearly every phase. So when we look at this, logistics is right here in the middle. How do you think materials get from the source to the company and all these other steps? It has to be transported, regardless if it's someone carries it or someone puts it in a golf cart or puts it on a pallet or puts it on a truck or a barge, or even doing it by sea freight on a container ship. It all has to be moved somehow. So when you think of logistics, think of it that way. How does the item get from one place to the other, and also the relevant information that goes along with it? So the Council for Supply Chain Management Professionals, also known as CSCMP, and that's their website, CSCMP, I believe it's .org. So they say logistics is that part of the supply chain management that plans, implements, and controls the efficient, effective forward and reverse flow and storage of goods, services, and related information between the point of origin and the point of consumption in order to meet the customer's requirements. So that's a big, complicated way of saying getting it from point A to point B, and also making sure the information gets there. So, and if you remember from our other topics, we're trying to add value to the customer. So the customer values their requirements. And if you meet those requirements, such as making sure it gets delivered on time, it gets delivered in the morning instead of the evening, all these little details when you're talking about customer requirements. So there's 7 rights of logistics. So we have to get the right product to the right customer at the right time, in the right condition, in the right quantity, at the right price, at the right place, for the right cost. That's a lot of rights in that sentence. But all of that is involved in logistics. And if you get 6 out of 7 of those, people are not going to be happy. You have to be perfect each time with with logistics. Because have you ever had a package get delivered late? Or maybe get delivered to the neighbor's house on accident? Or you gotten somebody else's package? Well, that was a violation of one of these rights. So imagine how unhappy you were. So with logistics, you need to try to make sure all of these are accomplished 100% of the time. So logistics creates value through several things, and 3 main areas. Movement, so that's when it's moving from place to place. Storage, so it's in a temporary holding. And then processing. So either that's information processing or actually doing something with that material. All of these add value. So movage, storage, and processing, right? So we have our 3 areas. So when we have these aligned, it supports customer value. And then we have movement is just the transportation of the goods. Storage, we have warehousing, stored in a warehouse, or in-transit storage. So some places put stuff on a truck and ship it, and it's considered in storage because it's in a trailer somewhere. Or that trailer is sitting in a rest stop overnight because it's a multiple day trip. Well, it's in transit, and that's how the company is accounting for the property. And then planning, we have to plan it. So that how is that information going to get from place to place? How are we going to have the visibility and tracking of that? Have you ever tracked a shipment that you were having come to you? You put in that UPS or FedEx or USPS tracking number, and you can see where it's at, or at least last time it was scanned. And then we have the value-added activities. So we'll go into that on our next slide. So we have third-party logistics, or 3PL, and they provide a variety of activities that add value. So customized packaging. An example would be General Mills. So General Mills doesn't start packing the cereal box until there's an order. Because if it's going to one grocery store, they might want them in cardboard boxes. But if it's sent to Walmart, for example, they might want it on a pallet and no other boxes, just the pallet and shrink wrap around it. Could be something like that. They might want a 24-ounce cereal box or an 18-ounce cereal box. Depends on what the customer wants. So General Mills has found that it's easier just to package it as it's ordered. That way they don't have stuff just sitting around because they made a size that no one wants or don't need as often. So we have final assembly. So like Fender, the guitar company, they teamed up with UPS to inspect guitars for quality and tune them prior to delivery. That's a pretty interesting thing. So that way, when you get that guitar, you can play it right away without having to worry about it being out of tune. And then repair. If you ever have the unfortunate need for a repair of your computer, this is what's likely going to happen. Like how Toshiba has, they partnered with UPS to speed up laptop repair because they are located with UPS at an air hub in Kentucky. So I believe Dell is co-located with FedEx in Memphis, Tennessee. So, all these different ways of adding value using third-party logistics. So, but logistics, all these things cost money, right? Well, we have logistics in our economy, at least the United States economy here. So these numbers are from 2015, but you can see that logistics costs are only $1.3 trillion, and it's actually down 1.5% from the previous year. So logistics is making things cheaper, and it's costing less because you're able to do things such as a full truckload instead of a less than truckload, or using a private or dedicated shipper. So all these different ways can help save money. And in our economy, logistics is a huge part of our economy. So if we look at this, comparative logistics costs as a percent of gross domestic product. The United States at the time of this image was 8.5% of the gross domestic product. That's a pretty sizable chunk. But if you look at Asia in general, 17%. And then you have Japan, that's at 11%. So what gives the United States an advantage when it comes to our logistics cost as a percent of our GDP? Now, if you imagine, we might have at this time the largest GDP in the world, but there's many countries that are very close to us, such as China, and they're at 15%. So what makes us better in this regard than China? It's tough to say, and there's a lot of factors. It could be our interstate system in the United States, or our port system, or our rail system. But in China, they have a really good rail system. So is it all done by truck? Or do they have a good interstate system that those trucks can use? It would take a lot to figure this one out. So, logistics is, such a vast field. And in the supply chain, there is a class you'll be taking that's just logistics, inventory and logistics. So it just doesn't stop here. So next we can move on to, how do we move this stuff? How do we move the goods from point A to point B, or from the point of origin to the final stop for consumption? Let's go ahead and move on to that and see that.